Welcome to today's explainer. Have you ever looked at someone, just typing away on their laptop at a beach cafe and thought, come on, is that actually a real job? Well, science says absolutely yes. Today, we're tracing how this lifestyle, which honestly used to feel like a fringe internet guru kind of thing, has completely transformed into a robust, strictly quantified academic subject. We're going to see how this radical shift in work isn't just a passing trend. It's a profound transformation that the global scientific community is actively defining and measuring. I'm literally so excited to guide you through this, taking us from an abstract lifestyle concept straight into hard, tracked academic data. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive right in with the core question driving our entire analysis today. What exactly is a digital nomad? I mean, sure, it sounds like a trendy buzzword, right? But to scientists, sociologists, and economists, it represents a totally new typology of worker. It's a massive, fundamental break from literally centuries of traditional labor models. But here's the catch. To understand the scientific literature behind this, we've got to unpack the definition itself. Because pinning down exactly what makes someone a nomad in the digital age, it is way more complex than it looks on the surface. To make sense of all this, we've broken today's explainer down into 3 quick segments. First, we'll look at the concept of digital nomadism in the scientific literature. Second, the platforms and flexibility infrastructure that actually makes it happen. And third, the bibliometric analysis data. So, starting us off, Section 1, the concept of digital nomadism. Let's look at this new worker typology. Think about the traditional workplace for a second. For generations, work meant physical building, right? Tied to a specific spot on a map with very strict operating hours. But the evolution of nomadism is basically this historic uncoupling of work from physical geography. If we look at how this evolved chronologically, it basically breaks down into 3 major phases. Phase 1 is the origins. The actual term digital nomad was first coined by authors Makimoto and Manners. They saw the very early seeds of this happening. Then, boom, Phase 2, the digital era. Technological advancement comes in and completely rewrites the fundamental rules of work. Which brings us to Phase 3, the present day. Thanks to digital tech, the boundaries between work and leisure have become incredibly blurred, creating a completely unique, brand new type of worker. Now, what's really fascinating here is how distinctly the literature defines this new worker. Digital nomads are essentially people who work in the new digital economy. They travel to different places for work, and this is absolutely crucial. They do not have an office or regular working hours. Did you catch what's missing there? The anchor. There's literally no physical office building, no rigid 9-to-5 constraint. It is pure geographical and temporal independence, entirely fueled by the digital economy. But here's the thing, because this lifestyle is so incredibly disruptive to our normal societal models, academia has essentially been playing this massive game of tug-of-war with the definition. I mean, are these people a subject for labor studies? Are they a subcategory of tourism? Or maybe they're best studied under mobility frameworks? Academia has historically really struggled to put a backpacker with a laptop into just one neat little box. The research is scattered all over the place across very different disciplines, simply because the lifestyle touches basically every single part of human behavior. So, the crucial point to take away here is that despite all that academic fragmentation, we can definitely identify constants. Whenever you read a definition of a digital nomad, no matter who wrote it or what field they're in, 5 common features always pop up. They rely on digital work. They require immense flexibility. They are characterized by mobility. And they are deeply, deeply driven by a shared identity and community. Those 5 pillars completely unify the scattered academic literature. Actually, take a second and think about your own job. How many of those pillars do you rely on every single day? Moving right along, that brings us to Section 2, platforms and flexibility infrastructure. Let's talk about the digital ecosystem. Okay, so we know who the nomads are, but now we really need to shift our focus to how they actually function. Because let's be real, you can't just wander out into the woods with a laptop and suddenly call yourself a nomad. You need an invisible digital backbone to sustain you. To truly grasp nomadism in today's context, we have to analyze the entire ecosystem. This lifestyle does not exist in a vacuum. It requires a highly specific environment, where organizations and the very nature of work itself are actively altered by digital platforms. That's what keeps these workers connected, paid, and productive while they're on the move. Let's break down how this infrastructure builds step by step. The technological leap that makes flexible working possible heavily relies on this platform infrastructure. Step one is the establishment of markets. We're talking about digital spaces where nomads can actually find work and clients from literally anywhere on Earth. Step two is the development of payment systems, because obviously, borderless work requires borderless, totally reliable ways to get paid. And finally, step three is the overall facilitation of remote and independent work through all sorts of software and connectivity tools. These platform components, they are the absolute lifeblood of the whole nomad ecosystem. Which brings us to our final part, Section 3, Bibliometric Analysis Data. Time to track the trend. This is where we really narrow our conceptual funnel. We've talked about the theory, we've talked about the technology, but how do scientists actually measure this massive global phenomenon? Well, they use hard data drawn from massive academic databases. The two absolute heavyweights in this space are the Web of Science and Scopus. By pulling data from these huge global literature repositories over a set period, researchers are able to ground our conceptual understanding into a verifiable, quantifiable scientific reality. The academic tool they use to do this is called bibliometric analysis. Basically, think of it as connecting the dots and counting trends across thousands of published papers. The goals of a bibliometric study are incredibly precise. First, it allows scientists to quantitatively examine patterns. Second, it helps identify global trends, like pinpointing the exact moment when and where the academic interest in digital nomads spiked. And third, it explores relationships within the scientific literature, showing us how, say, an article on tourism mobility might formally connect to a completely different study on platform payment systems. It literally turns that abstract ecosystem we just talked about into measurable, concrete data points. All of this leaves us with a genuinely fascinating reality to ponder. We've seen how the digital nomad shifted from this niche idea by Makimoto and Manners into a highly structured ecosystem backed by serious platform infrastructures, and finally, into a measurable subject rigorously tracked by global scientific databases like Scopus and Web of Science. And the scientific literature shows this movement is only growing. So I'll leave you with this thought to chew on. As these digital platforms keep evolving and remote infrastructure becomes practically flawless, is being a digital nomad going to become the new standard? And will traditional office-bound work actually become the new anomaly? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.
Welcome to this explainer. Today we're putting on our professor hats and diving deep into 2 decades of hard data from the Web of Science and Scopus databases. We're looking at a massive bibliometric study to figure out one crucial thing: how digital nomadism went from being just a quirky travel trend to a full-blown phenomenon that is literally reshaping how the global workforce operates.
For years, right, when you heard the term digital nomad, you probably pictured a backpacker typing away on a laptop at some sunny beachside cafe. But when we actually dig into the hard data, we have to ask ourselves, is digital nomadism still just about laptops and wanderlust, or has it evolved into a massive systemic shift in how corporations, economies, and even entire governments actually operate?
So here's our roadmap through all this data. We're going to hit academic trends, look at interdisciplinary shifts, break down a thematic map of future models, tackle the platform economy and laws, and wrap up with a forward-looking vision report.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Academic Trends and Key Findings. Now, tracking this topic academically isn't exactly new. The very first paper dropped back in 2006, but honestly, academia didn't pay much attention until about 2016. And then, well, 2020 happened. The pandemic hit, physical lockdowns forced the world into remote work, and suddenly, researchers were absolutely fascinated. We saw a massive, absolute peak in citations in 2020, which triggered this exponential wave of research. Just to put that into perspective, by 2024, there were 67 major academic articles published in a single year.
Moving on to Section 2, Interdisciplinary Shifts and Concept Clusters.
So the volume of research exploded, But what are all these academics actually studying? Well, early on, researchers basically treated digital nomads as just a tiny subset of the tourism industry. You'd see words like backpackers or leisure popping up everywhere. But today, academia is looking at this through some highly rigorous economic lenses. We are witnessing a stark interdisciplinary shift away from tourism and toward heavy-hitting topics like international taxation, neoliberalism, the gig economy, and corporate management.
To really prove this shift, let's take a professor's approach and look at the study's keyword co-occurrence network. Basically, this maps out which concepts researchers link together most often. 4 distinct clusters emerge. 2 of them revolve around everyday remote work dynamics. But the real paradigm shift is in the other clusters, which focus heavily on macroeconomics, international taxation, and citizenship. This data definitively proves that digital nomadism is no longer viewed as just a niche lifestyle choice. It's now recognized as a profound socio-economic phenomenon with massive legal implications.
Which brings us to Section 3, thematic map and the engine of change. To figure out exactly where future work models are heading, we need to break down the study's thematic map. On one side, you have motor themes. These are the concepts actively driving the science forward, like the gig economy, management, and organization. On the other side, you have basic themes, which are less developed but incredibly important to the field, like knowledge work and international mobility. So what's the big takeaway here, and why does this matter for your career? When you combine these themes, a very clear structural trajectory emerges. The future is all about remote knowledge workers operating within project-based gig economies.
And that leads us to a massive structural shift known as projectification. Companies are completely ditching standard permanent employment structures to become more agile. Instead, they're leaning heavily into temporary, flexible, project-based roles. And honestly, this environment is an absolutely perfect fit for digital nomads. As corporations projectify their workflows, the digital nomad is no longer this rare outlier. They actually become the ideal, highly adaptable candidate for the modern corporate machine.
Let's pivot to Section 4, platform economy, taxes, and international laws.
If work is just becoming a series of temporary, global projects, how exactly do these borderless workers connect with organizations? The answer lies in the rise of platform capitalism. This is a whole new economic phase that moves us way beyond traditional corporate structures. Digital platforms are stepping in as the ultimate middleman. They seamlessly connect local and global markets, bringing together people who want to sell their labor with the organizations that want to hire them, totally erasing geographical borders. The platform itself literally becomes the new borderless workplace.
The source analysis hits the nail on the head here, noting that digital platforms establish the conditions for maximum labor flexibility through their demand-oriented nature. This is the exact engine fueling the gig economy. Because they are purely demand-driven, they allow nomads to constantly secure diverse, temporary projects while traveling. It's the ultimate flexibility ecosystem for both the worker and the employer. But there's a huge systemic collision happening right now. The rapid, borderless growth of these digital platforms has totally outpaced international law. Think about it. If a worker from the UK is sitting in Portugal, completing a project for a company in the US, who taxes that labor? Which country's labor laws protect that worker? This lack of comprehensive regulation creates a massive gray area, and it's one of the most urgent macroeconomic challenges highlighted in the academic data.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Vision Report and Future Trends.
By synthesizing all these dense academic findings, we've put together a vision report that predicts 3 major trends for the next decade. First up, corporate adoption. Companies are going to stop seeing remote work as an exception and will structurally adopt nomadic employment models. Second, taxation. Governments are inevitably going to catch up, leading to strict, highly structured international tax policies designed specifically for mobile workers. And third, skills. As this becomes the norm, we're going to see a massive focus on digital skills sustainability, ensuring workers don't become technologically obsolete in a fully projectified world.
But as we look to the future, we have to neutrally acknowledge a really fascinating paradox, highlighted by the top researchers in this field. There's a sharp contrast between the promise of this lifestyle and the actual reality. The promise of digital nomadism is total autonomy, ultimate freedom, and boundaryless travel. But the reality revealed by the data? It's quite different. Chasing that autonomy requires intense self-discipline just to manage the blurred lines between work and leisure. Plus, to manage a remote workforce, companies are increasingly relying on heightened digital surveillance. The freedom to work from anywhere often goes hand in hand with the reality of being constantly monitored digitally.
Which leaves us with one final, provocative question to think about. As governments crack down on international tax laws and corporations projectify their workforces while ramping up digital tracking on global platforms, will the digital nomad of tomorrow truly be free? Or are we just watching this phenomenon evolve into a highly regulated, heavily surveilled version of standard employment inside a borderless digital office? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. And remember to keep questioning the changing nature of work.